Well, greetings and welcome. I'm Professor Tamer Çavuşgil from Georgia State University, Cyber, and I have the pleasure of thanking you all for joining us for another great conversation. Those of you who are familiar with our webinar series know that we started these almost weekly webinars offered to you every Thursday from Georgia State University, Cyber, 11 a.m. on the East Coast of the United States since April 2020. And since then, we've covered many topics, over 70 webinars. Initially, we started with education, teaching, especially online teaching, moved on to research topics in international business. And most recently, we've been having great conversations with senior business executives. And today, I'm very pleased to say that we have another very interesting one with two major speakers from an interesting industry, interesting company that we will feature. So just I want to thank the sponsors of these webinar series, which are 9 other cyber centers. Cybers, as many of you know, are centers of excellence in international business designated by the U.S. Education Department, and have been functioning as teaching, outreach, and research units at major business schools. There are 16 of us around the country. These sessions are recorded and made available to you for later viewing and sharing it with your colleagues' networks. Recording will be available in just a couple of days on our GSU-CIBER website, as well as GSU-CIBER's YouTube channel. So do look for that email link that you'll be receiving. You'll also be receiving, when you log off from this webinar, in just about an hour, you will get a short survey in the email, 5 questions with your feedback on the session, as well as suggestions for future sessions, topics, teams, speakers, and so on. Please take time to do that for us. And please use Q&A's function for your comments and questions. I'm going to ask our colleagues, Elizabeth and Sebastian, to monitor that and take the questions as we go. And then if you have a question about the Zoom link and so on, please use the chat room. So with that, let me just get on to a topic of the day. And this is really a wonderful story. Today, we're featuring an interesting company, YKK, and a great success story in many ways. Just a couple of years ago, just before the pandemic, myself and my colleagues, Elizabeth and Sebastian, had a chance to visit Jessica Cork. I'm going to introduce her very quickly and have conversations with her and other executives at YKK headquarters in Macon, Georgia, which led to a very interesting discussion, and later on to a piece in Harvard Business Review Insights, which we call Lessons in Longevity from an 88-year-old zipper company. Now, the company is older actually today, but the story is still very important, very compelling story. So for that, we are grateful for Jim Reed, the CEO of YKK Corporation of America, join us today. He leads the YKK Corporation of America, the Western Hemisphere. I think, Jim, you cover something like 16 operating companies in the Western Hemisphere and 6 time zones. I don't know how you do it, especially with travel and time zone differences, but thank you for being here. Jim is an experienced executive, has been with the company for many years, as well as has extensive experience. I'm not going to be able to go into detail because we want to save time for conversation, but thank you so much, Jim, for joining us. Of course, I mentioned Jessica Cork's name already. Jessica serves as Vice President for Community Engagement and Corporate Communications at YKK Americas. She does a lot of engagement. We know that she, among other things, she's the chair of the Japan-America Society of Georgia. And I know, Jessica, you've been with the company for many years, and you're one of the few fluent speakers of Japanese, I think, that I know, at least around Georgia and Atlanta. So thank you, Jessica, for joining us. And we have a couple of colleagues joining us as discussants with me. I have pleasure introducing Elizabeth Napier, Dr. Elizabeth Napier from University of Toledo. Elizabeth was one of the original researchers with me. She has graduated and has assistant professor job, has been teaching at the University of Toledo for almost 3 years now, Elizabeth, correct? And we have also Sebastian. Of course, Sebastian, you may remember Sebastian van der Weg. You may remember previous webinars as well. He is one of our advisors, Georgia State University cyber advisors, and senior executive at major companies, including Coca-Cola, and now running his own communications consulting company. And welcome, Sebastian, for joining us today. So when we had this request with Jim and Jessica, we had at least three goals. We wanted to kind of share the very interesting and compelling story of this Japanese-owned company, but private still, the key factors contributing to YKK's longevity. And we wanted to gain some insights as to future opportunities and challenges. We'll kind of look back a little bit, but we look forward as well with the company's prospects, and also offer some implications for other companies seeking such sustained success in the business, in a very competitive business, always, regardless of the industry. Changing times, disruptions, we have seen so much of it, especially recently. So with that, let me just get on with our discussion by asking both Jim and Jessica to give us a little bit of an overview of YKK for our participants on this call who may not be as familiar as we are with the organization, with the company, with its history. A little bit about from you, Jim and Jessica.
Sure. Well, I'll jump in on that question, and thank you so much for everyone for being here. We love talking about our company, so we're very excited about this opportunity. So YKK, as you mentioned, Japanese company, was founded in 1934 in Tokyo, but we are now very much a global company. We operate in 72 countries and regions around the world, 109 companies, and we've got about 44,000 employees globally. We are best known for manufacturing zippers. If you haven't heard of us before, just take a look at a pair of jeans. Most likely, you're going to see the little letters YKK on your zipper. We make about 10 billion zippers per year. For perspective, that can wrap around the world 80 times. Number of zippers we manufacture each year. But we also make a variety of other what we call fastening products that includes hook and loop, which is otherwise known sometimes by our competitor's name of Velcro, but it is called hook and loop, plastic buckles, webbing, and snaps and buttons. We also have a sister company that manufactures architectural products under the brand name YKK AP, and they also have a large presence here in Georgia as well. So they make storefronts, curtain walls, and doors and windows for both commercial and residential use. Just a bit about our sales. Now, I do have to give you these figures in yen because that's how we report it globally. But last fiscal year, we had 797 billion yen in sales. I used to be able to tell you that that's easy to convert because it's like approximately 100 yen to the dollar. But these days, the exchange rate with the Japanese yen is just going kind of crazy. It's like up to 146. So I don't know how you want to calculate, but about 800 billion yen in sales. And then globally, we're divided into 5 regions, and that includes our region. So we're known here in the Western Hemisphere as the YKK Americas Group. And we've got about 3,800 employees here in 11 countries in the region. So basically, almost every country within the region. So we go from Canada down to Brazil, Argentina, and Chile. And we have about 43.5 billion yen in sales last fiscal year. And talking, I know today we're talking main topic is longevity, but we've actually, for a Japanese company, we have been in the American market a long time. So it's not just that the company was founded in Tokyo in 1934, but we have been here in the United States since 1960. So we're actually been here 62 years. That's very early for Japanese companies. So we're not the first, but we are definitely among the first in terms of entering the American market. And actually in Georgia, we are the first Japanese company. So we've been in Georgia since 1970, but we also have several companies within our region that actually celebrated 50 years this year. And that includes YKK El Salvador and YKK Brazil. And actually YKK USA Macon, which is the manufacturing facility that you visited back in 2019, they're celebrating 50 years in 2024. So, we can talk about longevity both on the global level, but also on the local level here.
Outstanding. That's a great overview. Jim, do you want to add anything to what Jessica provided?
I think the only thing I would add to that is that YKK's management team's decision to build its U.S. factory in Macon, Georgia, was due largely to the relationship our founder, Tadao Yoshida, had with then Governor Jimmy Carter. And we were casting about looking for places in the Southeast to serve the Southeastern denim market. And the reason I talk about that is because leadership, especially at the political level, is very important for driving investment. And that personal relationship is also important. I think yesterday or today, the state of Georgia just highlighted the groundbreaking for the Hyundai plant, which is wonderful. And whenever I have a chance to talk to political leaders, I tell that story to remind them the criticality of that personal relationship. And it doesn't mean you have to become best friends, but it certainly is important to have that personal touch. And through that friendship, which has grown over the decades, YKK has remained closely connected to the Carter Center ever since.
That's a very interesting point you're making, Jim. And the importance of personal relationships and providing a hospitable environment for foreign companies that have many alternative places. This is a big country, 50 states, they can go anywhere. Yes, Georgia was unique in terms of Carolinas with Alabama and so on, being a textile sector, especially at the time. But that personal relationship by then Governor Jimmy Carter, he established with the founder of YKK was very important. I mean, there's Jessica shared some of those interesting first interactions and taken interest in the sincere interest, genuine interest in the company and finding them a location, a beautiful location, I must say. If anybody has not visited Macon, they should, especially in the springtime, right, Jessica? I mean, it's a beautiful area. But yeah, that personal relationship made a big difference, I'm sure, in the final decision to locate in Macon, North American headquarters in Macon, Georgia.
That's right.
Elizabeth, when you and I and Phil Bolton visited Macon, Georgia, at Jessica's invitation, had an opportunity to tour the facilities. It was a wonderful exposure to us. We spent some time speaking with the executives as well. We were so inspired. We wanted to write this article, a case study in a sense, and then pandemic came, we were delayed. But together with Sebastian's help, we were able to put together this piece in HBR Insights, which focused on the longevity dimension. But we identified 6 factors. If you want to provide us an overview of those 6 factors, as what we thought, you and I and Sebastian thought were key factors contributing to YKK's longevity.
Of course, of course. So again, upon our examination after our visit at YKK, we were inspired and we found, again, 6 factors that contributed to the success and longevity of YKK. And so those are its commitment to stakeholders, its private ownership, focus on quality, company values, local embeddedness, and also lastly, its dynamic adjustment to industry changes. So just to give you a little bit of background to each factor, first, its commitment to stakeholders. So YKK has gone to great lengths to connect with its stakeholders on a local, community, and a global level. A key part of its engagement is giving back to its surrounding community and operating in a sustainable fashion. Secondly, we looked at YKK's private ownership. So many privately owned companies at some point decide to either list publicly or sell out to a larger firm. YKK has done neither. So this has given the firm plenty of flexibility to decide its strategic direction without the constant pressure of quarterly returns. The third factor contributing to YKK's success that we found is its focus on quality, its high focus on quality. As Jessica mentioned earlier, if you flip over your zipper, you will find the YKK imprint on the back. And in my experience, ever since I visited the facility, you will find these are the better zippers and of a higher quality. So YKK has gone to great lengths to differentiate itself from other manufacturers in that industry. And so one of YKK's core values is to insist on quality in everything, every part of their supply chain. And all of its business activities actually revolve around this assurance of quality. The fourth factor contributing to the longevity and high success of the firm is YKK's company values, which I find personally inspirational. So the firm's corporate governance system is further operationalized through its core values, which are do not fear failure, experience, build success, create opportunities for your employees, to insist on quality in everything, and lastly, to build trust, transparency, and respect. The fifth factor of local embeddedness, so YKK runs some key components of its business from its headquarters in Japan through technology, logistics, sales, and system processes. But the operational control actually lies within the company's 6 regional operations across the globe. This is leading role of regions ensures that decisions are based on making the most of their respective regional characteristics. Okay, and then the last factor is YKK's dynamic adjustment to industry changes. So like Professor Chaviskill said earlier, we have been studying the YKK's firm for about 3 to 4 years now. And so this was pre-pandemic, and now even looking post-pandemic, we found that a big reason for YKK's growth in the market for zippers, it's the continuing trend of customization, which plays into the firm's dynamic capabilities and its focus on innovation.
Wonderful, Elizabeth, and that's a great overview. But I'm going to ask Jim and Jessica to give them the opportunity to reflect and maybe talk about something that you have not yet mentioned, Elizabeth, the cycle of goodness. I mean, we kept hearing that so many times, and that's built into the, again, organizational culture of YKK and founders' vision. If maybe you can, Jim and Jessica, you can talk about that, and then let us know whether you agree with these 6 factors. Did we miss the mark on any of them? Would you add other success factors to this? And let's have some
Sure.
comments on that.
Happy to jump into that. Yes, so I agree with all 6. I think that 3 actually stand out for longevity, and I'm not going to talk about quality in that grouping, and it may be somewhat sacrilegious for me to do that. But when you talk about success over the long term, of course, quality is table stakes. But you can have a very high quality product, but without that factor of company values and private ownership, because I think those 2 are married. Private ownership allows you to live by those values, and we don't have that public traded requirement. We don't have the burden of Wall Street looking quarter to quarter for our results, and therefore the focus is on how are you fulfilling the company values, and that leads to the cycle. That's embodied in the cycle of goodness, which very simply says no one prospers without rendering benefit to others. That is actually quite difficult to use to navigate through modern business, because you still need to make a profit in order to operate effectively. But it is the thing that helps you succeed over the long term, because when decision making gets to be very difficult, like when it gets up to, you know, a hard decision that I have to make, it's usually because there are no good answers. And going back and relying on the cycle of goodness as, okay, what's the right thing to do? All right, this is going to hurt, but what's the right thing to do? Then you can move forward and make that decision with confidence. The third of those factors that I wanted to highlight was that commitment to stakeholders. And when we talk about stakeholders, we're talking about the customers, we're talking about our employees, we're talking about our suppliers, and we're talking about our community. What you don't talk about is your shareholder. Of course, your shareholder is important. And of course, we send dividends to our shareholder every year, but that's not the focus. The focus is on those other things. If you take care of those other things, then the shareholder will get their dividend on the back end. That's the secret. If you focus first on shareholder to dividends, I think shareholder value can mean a lot of things, but shareholder dividends as a publicly traded company, or shareholder return, then I think you're hamstringing yourself for the long term. That's, yeah.
You make such an important point. I mean, that kind of tells the story between publicly owned companies and private ownership, the merits of private ownership, where you don't have to. I mean, you are not overlooking dividends back to the owner, but certainly there are other considerations that are just as important. And the loyalty that you have created among your employees, I mean, speak as a fact. I mean, the dedication, the time, expertise they spend, and I suspect you have a very low turnover ratio as well among your. Sebastian, I'm going to give you a chance, and Jessica, you may want to add to what Jim just mentioned as well. But Sebastian, we haven't given you a chance to speak yet, so please go ahead and reflect also.
Yeah, thank you, Tamer, and thank you for being here, Jim and Jessica. It's a great topic for every one of us. Question on your three factors you just mentioned. Obviously, they're highly related to each other. One builds off the other, so to speak. But when you make a business decision, it comes down to a point of which stakeholder group you then prioritize. So how do you go through that process?
I haven't run into a situation amongst those stakeholders where I've had to prioritize one over the other. I think they all work in harmony when you talk about employees, community, and customers. So I think you might be speaking to the point where a customer may say, if you don't reduce your price below a certain level, then I'll leave you. Mm-hmm. There's a certain point at which we're not able to serve the customer and the others together, and therefore we cannot serve the customer. And other companies will take advantage of that. I mean, you say yes, you see our zipper everywhere, but we don't actually have that large of a percentage of the marketplace. Certainly not globally, because there's whole chunks of the marketplace that does need our quality, and we're just simply not going to be able to price ourselves into that part. So if you talk about priorities, that's where we're going. Of course, we're always trying to reduce our costs constantly, but we're not able to meet our competitors' prices.
So said differently, in a way, you're balancing the interests of all these stakeholders to make sure they're all represented in the decision that you take.
That's right. That's right.
That's great. That's a great answer. And I've been, since we got on this, and since we planned this webinar, I've been dying to ask a question, not just did we miss any factors, but is there something that we missed altogether that in your day-to-day really contributes to the fact that you guys are now 89 years old and that you've been highly successful along the way?
Well, there are a couple of things that I thought of when I saw that question. But one thing I do want to say also regarding the stakeholders, that probably back in 2019, we weren't talking about quite as much, but it's certainly something that we're talking a whole lot about today, and that's sustainability and really the planet being our primary stakeholder. And our leadership in Japan especially is really pushing that with us too. We have really big sustainability goals that quite frankly are quite difficult to make. And I think all of the decision making, even though we technically still say we have these three stakeholders of the employees, the customers, and the community, but then the planet and sustainability being primary too. So that's definitely something that had you come to visit me this year. I know it was in our discussions even back in 2019, but it would have been absolutely number one, probably the first thing that we would be talking about. So I wanted to add that point. And then secondly, this is particularly, I guess, from my perspective, as in my intro, my background is in Japanese, and my academic training is in Japanese. And I really would be remiss if I didn't mention that although YKK is really great at adapting to local markets, we are a Japanese company. And I do think when we're talking about longevity, we do have to mention that Japanese companies are really good at staying in business for a really long time. Actually, there's over 33,000 businesses in Japan that are at least a century old, and Japan has over half of the world's companies that are older than 200 years. So there's actually even a word for this in Japanese. It's called shinese, and that means like a long-standing company. So I think it's also part of our DNA as a Japanese company that we're here for the long haul, and we're constantly planning for the long term. There's no, I think Jim was saying, but like no exit strategy, we plan in 4-year business cycles, and we plan in 20-year business cycles, and we have sustainability goals out to 2050. So that's one thing. And then also, we're hearing a lot more discussion these days about stakeholder capitalism. And I think that's really something that Japan and Japanese companies have a lot to share with the world. They do this very well. This is, I'm very proud of YKK's culture, but YKK's culture comes out also of Japanese culture, in which thinking about these three stakeholders, that's very common in Japanese companies. There's actually a concept that dates back to the 1700s called Sampo Yoshi. It's basically in English like triple wage satisfaction, or kind of the triple bottom line, I think we say in English. But that developed among merchants, and that was the idea that basically that you're thinking not just about the buyer and the seller, but also about how that's contributing to society. So that's what I would add to the discussion. I don't know if Jim's got anything else to say there.
Yeah, I would say that I would focus on the lack of an exit being part of our strategy at all. There is no exit strategy, and I think that's extremely healthy. I participated in a number of fora and discussion groups with other presidents and CEOs in the United States, and exit strategy is critical to their plan. It's critical to their shareholders, critical to them. And for us, we are that infinite player. And I think that gives us a lot of strength. And it also helps in decision-making and building your business plan.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
A question, sorry, Tom, a question that naturally came to mind when you talk about 33,000 companies been around for over a century. Do you know if those are public companies or private companies, or what percentage it is?
I haven't seen a breakdown of that. That would be interesting to know.
So maybe for all the academics on the call today, that might be a good research question. Sorry, Tom, go ahead.
I was just going to quickly react before you take on some questions and comments as well. I mean, Jessica's comments, first of all, sustainability, yes, we had the opportunity to discuss that, 3 years ago. I know it's even more emphasized, but you kind of invented and adapted sustainability and stakeholder capitalism way before other, let's say, US-based companies, way before. And I think you correctly attributed that to the Japanese culture and Japanese business culture. So when today we talk about connected capitalism, stakeholder capitalism, responsible global business, and so on, and we hear, initially it was Unilever CEO who, kind of popularized, and past CEO of Coca-Cola also introduced his term, his vocabulary as well. But it has become a very important issue today, corporate social responsibility, but you never overlook that from the get-go. I mean, that's, again, as Jim was emphasizing, comes with the private ownership and different philosophy. And what is remarkable about your longevity, I think, is that you've been able to do this, what is typically considered a commodity, right? Not necessarily branded product, but to compensate for the emergence of low-cost manufacturers, competitors around the world, which you have faced over time, you have diversified. So I think diversification into other businesses is part of the formula, secret, I think, recipe that you have put together very, very successfully.
Jim, I'm not sure if you wanted to comment on that, but I think that's also a very important point for us, especially here in the United States. Yeah, I know your article briefly touched on it, but YKK globally will be successful because they're in 72 countries, right? So as the world globalizes, becomes more international, I think YKK will always be able to get business depending on which country is growing. But here in the United States, part of our history, as we were saying, was we opened a factory in Macon, Georgia, in order to primarily serve the apparel industry, the textile industry. That was why the factory was here. And we went through talking to many of my colleagues who have been here since those days, since the 80s and the 90s, and had to go through this very, very difficult period when the apparel industry basically disappeared from this country. I think, like a lot of people, will be surprised to know the statistic that 98% of the clothing that Americans wear is manufactured overseas. It's only 2% that's manufactured in this country. And when you think about YKK, who located to serve customers who were, that's our business model, is to serve domestic, basically domestic, like local customers. And the reason that was the case is because generally the zipper is like the last thing to go into a garment, in the process. And so you're close by to the customers. And then we went through this period where in a matter of 5 to 10 years, basically most of the customers disappeared. So that meant that we had to be very innovative in seeking new industries. And I think as a company, we've done that very well, especially here in the United States. And we have even new industries that we're exploring right now. So it's not just at that point where things change. Now it's looking to see, what kind of customers are going to remain in the United States, and how can we serve them in ways that we never thought about before. So now these days we're serving like the space industry and the automotive industry. That was something that probably was not even imagined in the 1970s.
And we're continuing to drive into newer industries. And our focus, because of our reputation for quality, gives us a certain level of credibility in those areas. So you're going to see us continue to lean into industries that will respect the level of quality that we can bring. That would include medical devices or packaging, are very interesting as well.
And that was going to be my next question, is around building that brand, that YKK brand. While you're not very well known, everybody knows you that does know you, they know you for the zippers, right? But then you look at the financials and you realize that that's actually only 40% of your business. The rest is elsewhere. So to what extent does building a brand like you have done with zippers, extend to other parts of the business, as I think you alluded to it already, that helps you in terms of quality? But are there perhaps more plans to proactively then market YKK as a quality company?
I think there's a not to the extent you would think traditionally. And for better or for worse, the strategy had been to limit the extent to which the YKK brand was known in order to emphasize our customers. That was a strategic choice. So when you see the YKK zipper in a pair of Levi's jeans, you don't see necessarily a YKK hang tag, or you don't see, YKK highly promoted as a brand in and of itself. The emphasis was on how do we serve the customer. While that might limit our consumer exposure, at least from an advertising perspective, consumers' personal use actually gives us a lot more cachet, I think. But it gives us a certain level of credibility. So what I say is we're the most famous company you've never heard of. And so when I say I work for YKK, they look at me confused, and then they're like, oh, yeah, okay. So everybody knows us, but nobody really knows us. There's strengths and weaknesses in that.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And before I get to the next question, I do want to remind everybody, all the participants, that please, if you have a question, post it on the comment board in the chat box, and we'll make sure that we address it. And Jessica, you mentioned sustainability. How does that then, if you're not marketing directly to consumers, if you will, because a lot of big brands like Coca-Cola, they very much use sustainability as a way to speak directly to their consumers and to build their credibility. When you're not doing that, how do you still manage to invest as many resources and compete, if you will, with other players who compete solely on price?
Sure. Well, first of all, I mean, we may not be talking as much as we probably should directly to consumers. But the thing is, first of all, our customers really care about these issues. So, to the extent that we are primarily a B2B company, the customers are actually putting a lot of pressure on us too. So we're doing all the things that we think that should be done, but then the customers are constantly pushing us to do better and to raise the bar and making us better too. So, so that's one thing. But secondly, I mean, that's what our customers want, and even what their consumers want, I don't think is necessarily our primary concern anyway. Like, we have had a recycled zipper called Naturalon since 1994. I mean, like, nobody had a recycled zipper back in 1994, and yet we were selling it. Customers didn't want it, from what I understand, but we were still selling it, right? And now there's huge demand for that. So I think that regarding sustainability, I mean, it's the right thing to do, and we would be doing it anyway. By the way, that's one of our fundamental behaviors, do the right thing. So we would be doing it whether, whether the customers cared about it or not. However, I do think that in the past, I would say definitely 2 years, I think on a global level, we have gotten much, much better in communicating our sustainability story. And a lot of those sustainability communications are targeted not just to our customers, as has been traditional, but we are really starting to talk to the end users as well. And so we have a variety of ways of doing that. We're using social media a lot to tell that story. And it's not just about products, like, we're not posting necessarily a bunch of pictures of products, although that's some of it, but we're really telling our stories, about how we're trying to meet our sustainability goals. We're reporting our progress on our sustainability goals as if we were a publicly traded company. So it's very transparent. You can look inside of our reports and see exactly where we've done a good job and where we're not quite, measuring up. And then we've started to do things like, QR codes on hang tags. So it's interesting, we are doing some hang tags within the apparel industry that are specifically for customers, so the apparel companies that really do care about sustainability, and sustainability is one of the primary ways of them selling their product. YKK can really weigh into that, because we can also use, we may have a sustainable product that is inside of their sustainable product, and we can let the customer know not only is this entire garment sustainable, but the zipper inside of it, this is how it's made. And so we've got hang tags with QR codes where people can scan that and read the story.
It's a great point. Tamer, Elizabeth, Junaid, I know we haven't heard from you yet. Do you have any questions? Follow up on that?
Elizabeth.
Yeah, I have one question actually. So you're talking about selling to sustainable brands. So are you choosy to which brands you sell to? So for instance, what if a brand that maybe is fast fashion is trying to put YKK zippers and they're not ethically or sustainably sourced or manufactured? How do you navigate that?
We don't We don't necessarily have to navigate that. I think that YKK has been able to serve all customers. And when you have at one end a brand like Patagonia, we're running as fast as we can just to keep up with the drive that they have for sustainability and the other ESG things. And then you have other brands, and frankly, we're teaching them. And so I think it's better to be a participant and bring them up. Now, some of the fast fashion brands that you might have read about lately are run so incredibly inexpensively, they simply self-select to not buy our product. I'm not going to name them now, but some very popular Chinese brands that are coming under scrutiny, that they don't use a YKK zipper. They couldn't make any money if they did that.
No.
I may also follow up, we've seen a lot of disruptions, especially lately, let's say at least a decade now, but the pandemic problems also contributed to it. And one of the major disruptions, of course, was to the supply chains. To what extent YKK, Western Hemisphere, as well as the rest of the organization has been affected by that? Was that a big disruption to your operations?
The pandemic?
Pandemic and the supply chain disruptions.
No, pandemic wasn't anything. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, no, it was huge. It's huge. So the pandemic was a advanced degree for all of us on how to operate through diversity. It put a spotlight on everything. Everything got under a bright light. So there were a lot of things that we were doing in the past that were not helpful, and it allowed us to see what we needed to shed. Then you look at things like your culture in times of crisis, and you recognize how valuable that is. And then that spotlight goes onto that as well. And then you see those things that are of true value and you lean into those. So we learned the pandemic was very helpful for us to see what we needed to shed and what we needed to embrace. Supply chain, yes, it's been difficult. It's been more difficult for our customers than for us because, as Jessica indicated, we're in a lot of places. And so in some markets, we're able to advance success because of our locality. And in some places, our customers are getting other inputs from overseas and therefore are not able, it's like the automotive industry, lack of chips just means they can't order our zippers to put into seats. And that has been difficult. Yes.
So yeah, it goes back to what Jessica was talking about, geographic diversification and ability to move production and sourcing from one region to another, one country to another, certainly contributed to that. Yeah. I'll come back to one of the issues. So essentially you are, of course, a B2B company, and even though the end users may not be as familiar, your immediate customers are very familiar and you're in touch with them. But then you are also highly diversified in terms of end user industries, from space to architecture to medicine, medical devices, and maybe we'll hear more about that too. But that really increases the number of key accounts in a sense, right? You have to manage, be in touch with, be in tune with their demands. How do you handle that complexity? Because so many key customers around the world, they're global, but they're also coming from different industries and they're coming with new mandates. Certainly you meet the quality aspect very well, but other types of mandates that they may be coming. So it must be very complex, Jim, for you to look at the entire range.
Yes, it is. But, we break it down into a number of different groups. We have a global marketing group. In Europe, one group is in Europe and one group is in the United States. And these salespeople serve the brands and they are agnostic as to the location. That's why they're called the Global Marketing Group. And so that helps in the communication and breaking it down into submarkets. And then we break, regionally, we break things down by industry. So we have government, we have safety, we have automotive. So we do break it down by that. And it is very difficult because everybody has their own quality agreement. Everybody has their own standards. Everybody has their own third-party auditor. And so with our reputation for quality and our ability to show how we fulfill those requirements, we are actually able to be exempted from certain individual audit programs because we have an audit program that can be overarching. So our focus on quality in everything, to the extent we can be as good or better than anybody else, that actually translates across industries and allows us to not do those 1,000 different things. Sometimes we're still doing hundreds of different things instead.
It's a great point, Jim, and maybe it allows a follow-up question from Junaid here. He just posted, is that if you have these global sales teams, but you probably observe some differences in terms of what customers really want by region, in terms of how they value, for instance, sustainability. So how do you deal with that in terms of how you communicate with your brand, if you will, to your customers? If it's one global communication, how do you allow for differences?
Yeah, because it's not really a one global communication. So I think that is the beauty of this regional model that we have. So we, as I mentioned, briefly in the overview section, we're divided globally into 5 regions, and basically those 5 regions kind of focus on, well, actually we have 6 business regions and then 5 regions as far as compliance is concerned, but they are loosely grouped together based on the type of customer that tends to be manufacturing in that area. So for example, we spend a lot of time on this call talking about apparel or those big global brands, but those are mostly being manufactured in Asia, right? Southeast Asia, China, and those countries. So those marketing professionals and those salespeople in those regions are having a very different conversation than we are having here in the Americas region, which is, a lot of very high value added industrial type. I talked about automotive and space industry. And so it's not that we're speaking about, we have one voice as far as sustainability, and we have one voice in terms of our YKK culture, philosophy, and values. But as far as when we get down into talking about product, it's highly, individualized based on, even by the industry. Even within our Americas group, we have all these different industries. And one thing that I did want to add to that too, regarding those individual industries, is we have engineers who are experts in those industries going to talk directly to the engineers at our customer's company. And so they're not just walking in and saying, here's our zipper, please buy it. They're going in and saying, what challenge are you facing with getting something to close or attach? And then how can YKK partner with you to come up with a solution that will help your business? And it's very highly individualized with a lot of expertise internally about that specific industry.
Related point, Jessica, you're talking about, I'm thinking, at least I'm thinking about cross-fertilization of ideas, coordination among the 6 regions. Looks like even though each region is unique with its particular portfolio of customers and industries and so on, to what extent do you have coordination, cross-fertilization, sharing of best practices, one? And the second one, and maybe for Jim, in the international business literature, there's a long stream of work, research, publications on so-called headquarters subsidiary relationship. Applies more in the context of publicly owned companies, traditional companies. But much of the discussion is about control and authority, dissemination of, delegation of authority, to what extent you have strong mandates from the center, from the headquarters. In this case, Japanese ownership obviously is there, you cannot ignore. But to what extent do you have independence in decision making, especially strategic decision makings, and and decision making on the ground, let's say with respect to HR and pay scales and all that. But let's start with the first one, Jessica.
Well, I'd actually like Jim to address that first because he's got a lot to say about that, I'm sure.
Hard one. So which part of the question we're going to answer first?
Yeah, so the relationship between you is the Western Hemisphere and the Japanese ownership, let's call it. I don't know what you call that. I mean, and the extent to which you coordinate across the 6.
Pre-COVID, I was going to Japan 7 times a year, which was too many times. Right now I'm here in Atlanta, this is my day job. My night job is with our global meetings, which are going on right now. And so we have regular global meetings with our group officers. Jessica's spearheading a really cool thing with our partners in China. So I'm a group officer. There's a group officer in China, and we are taking our cycle of goodness and we are breaking it down. And we're having a head of manufacturing in one factory talk about what's the most important thing about production, and he answers that question. And then there's a counterpart in China that has to answer that question, and then they have a dialogue together. So we're actually strengthening that interaction. And we meet regularly with the other group officers, and we do share best practices, and especially as it relates to governance. Let's say governance as a better perspective, and then that bleeds into that notion of how much you're independent and how much control do you have, right? And then there's that famous old joke, I'm from corporate and I'm here to help, and we're local and we're glad to see you. Those are the 2 biggest lies in business. So you're always going to have that issue. However, if you're continually talking about your culture, if you're continually talking about your philosophy, then you as a manager are indicted. Right. So we have a thing called the fundamental behaviors that we talk about every week. This week is take ownership. And I won't go into all what we're going to talk about with that, but we talk about take ownership all week. And then the next week we switch over to the next one, provide meaningful appreciation, do the right thing always, treat people with respect. Okay. So if you're a manager and every time you start a meeting, we start with this fundamental behavior, and they have to say, okay, before we start this meeting, everyone, treat people with respect. And your employees don't believe that you're treating them with respect. You're going to have a credibility issue, and you're going to have a bit of a revolution. So handing over that philosophy and communicating it all the time with your employees puts you on the spot, and therefore you're able to effectively manage a compliance issue and have these HR guardrails for all employees across the region. Pay is going to be different based on the market. Even the hours are going to be different based on the market. You might have 3 shifts over here, and you might have 1 shift over there. But the notion of respect should be a through point. We also have a hotline, and we very much promote that. And we do get calls, and we do investigate that, and we do that through my office across the region.
Outstanding.
I would like to add one. Oh, go ahead, please.
No, please go ahead, Jessica.
Well, I was going to add to that too. One thing that I really appreciate about Japanese culture more broadly, and then YKK specifically, is it is very much, contrary to what a lot of people might think, a bottom-up culture to some extent, because what's really expected is that, at the local level, as an individual employee, that you're trying to find out what you find the problem, and then you're trying to find the solution, and you bring that up to your management. So I've heard the chairman of our company in Japan say to us, on countless occasions, he'll come and get people starting to complain, you should fix this or you should fix that. And he's like, well, that's up to you, isn't it? Like, what's your idea? So there's very much a sense of reporting up, but in terms of finding what the solution is, that's very much expected to be down, us. So like, we're the ones who have to figure out how to do that. And I think that there's also a lot of autonomy, especially with YKK. I do feel there's a lot of autonomy given to local management in each country, to run the business as they see fit, and then to just explain the results, explain what challenges are being faced. But I'm sure occasionally told, no, or maybe there's a different way to do it, but there is a lot of autonomy. And I do think also, I'm very proud of YKK for how much localization that we've had as well. And maybe that's partly we've been in this country for more than 60 years, but we have an American president here, and the prior president was American. And you don't always see that with every Japanese company, but I think that's very much part of our culture is to localize, but then to communicate with each other, to share best practices.
That
So there's a
autonomy, of
question.
course, is earned, and it's earned because of trust that they have built, and it's mutual trust. It goes both ways, but I mean, this is a message, by the way, Jim and Jessica. This is very useful for students studying international business, because obviously it's complex, but handling these complex issues in a meaningful way where you create trust in each other. I mean, it's really, isn't it the best? I mean, it's the starting place in a sense. Unless you have that, you don't have credibility. If you don't have credibility, there's cheating, etc. But you have, your company and your culture have been exemplary in many ways, and you have a lot to be proud of. I would say. We just have a few minutes left, and we may give you a chance to make some final comments on anything that you wish to talk about, as well as maybe future challenges going down the road, going forward. I mean, what's ahead? So maybe Jim will start.
Oh, sure. Okay, great. So I'm very, very excited about manufacturing this next generation. So many years ago, we talked about entering this next machine age, and we're in it now. And so it's really exciting place to be. If you're a student, manufacturing should be very high up, especially in the United States, on your list of things to check out. As far as a career is concerned. It's not a dirty, loud, banging, dangerous place anymore. It's very high tech, a lot of robotics, a lot of AI, and you're going to see more and more localization, more productivity, smaller units. That's going to be part of the sustainability story. If you have to ship a product all the way from China, that's a huge carbon footprint. And so when we can do it here, and you can be part of that, I find that to be very exciting, and it's happening now. I think we've seen some recent legislation to promote it even more. This, if we can over the next decade build a strong chip industry within the United States, I think that'll go a very long way as well.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. That's a great message. We'll convey to our students, definitely. Jessica.
Yeah, I'm super excited about our sustainability story and how we're trying to meet all of those ambitious goals, and then also what happens beyond our 2030 and 2050 goals. I also am very glad that we're currently living in an environment where others now are caring about that, other companies and also our employees, and also about the emphasis on our corporate culture and purpose. I really do think that especially the younger generation really wants to work in a company that does care about the environment, that does care about all of those stakeholders, the community, the employees, the customers, but that also has a strong purpose and can feel like they can work in a company where they can fulfill their own personal purpose through the values of the company. So that's kind of what gets me up in the morning and excited to come to work.
Beautiful message. Thank you, Jessica. Sebastian and Elizabeth, last words?
I had a couple more questions, and I know there's one question we didn't get to around technological advances and how do you keep up with them? And I know that's probably longer than what we have time for. But it's been really insightful, and thank you for sharing all your lessons. I certainly, throughout the process of writing the paper and And now having this conversation, I learned a lot. And if I probably would add anything based on it, I would maybe change one of the headings to the importance of building trust as well as values. And I think that's a key insight that you guys provided today.
Thank you very much. Yeah, next time we'll talk about our machinery division, where we make the machines that make our products.
Wonderful. Yes. Wonderful. Elizabeth, any last words?
I look forward to connecting with you more and hearing about how you're implementing AI throughout your entire supply chain. I think it's very exciting, and I agree with you 100% that the new generation is very much environmentally conscious and looking for jobs like that. So it's just been a joy to research your company.
Thank you.
Well, Jessica and Jim,
Thank
this
you.
has been truly a pleasure, very insightful. We've got a lot of food for thought. You certainly are exemplary leaders, and it is because of your leadership the company continues to do very, very well. We're delighted to be able to share this story with the HBR article, but I think this discussion here will be shared with even a larger number of people. Certainly our students and practitioners out there will benefit from it. So thank you so much taking time for this conversation, and hope to see you again and engage in another talk. Thank you again.
Please share our story.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye-bye.